If you Google what you can do for muscular dystrophy, one of the things that will likely come up is stretching. Keeping muscle healthy and flexible is one thing that people with MD, and I guess anyone, can benefit from. We all know the value in loosening up after exercise or a long day, and I'm going to go through 8 stretches that I try to do daily. So just before we get started, I thought I'd take you through what you might need if you want to follow along. So the first thing I'd recommend is comfy clothes. So these pants stretch, this shirt's pretty movable, just so you don't rip your pants, because that sucks, then you have to buy new pants. So that's the first thing I'd recommend. Also optional, but like a stretching mat, like a yoga sort of one. If you don't want to use a mat, you can just use the floor, I guess, a rug, carpet, I don't know, a blanket. You can get creative, but it's just something I'd recommend. Ugh. Usually when I stretch, I try to do between 15 and 30 seconds per stretch, usually closer to 30 or even longer, because sometimes it just feels good. And I wouldn't push too hard at the start because your muscles aren't completely flexy yet. Also, I wouldn't try to use force to stretch further, because that's just asking for an injury, which no one wants. Let's get into the stretches that I actually do. So the first stretch that I usually start with is a hip flexor stretch. So that's the muscle at the top that goes here. You can get really tight ones from sitting down all the time. It's a stretch that I learnt is good if your pelvis is kind of tilted, like if you've heard of anterior pelvic tilt. That's what I have, so that sort of stretches out these tight hip flexors. So pretty much what I do is I kind of just go down like that. So you have one leg in front and one leg behind, and then you sort of just lean forward like that. It probably looks really goofy, but you feel it kind of here. I'm sure there's another way to do this, but this is just what works for me. You can do it by staying a bit more upright and sort of just leaning like that. It's a little bit harder for me to balance because my abs aren't the best. Sometimes I can grab something nearby, so if you stretch near your bed, you can sort of do that if you struggle with balance. So the next stretch that I usually do is a hamstring stretch. So your hamstring is just the bit at the back of your upper leg. It's responsible for making your leg lift up that way. I mentioned in a previous video, one of my hamstrings is kind of useless, so this always feels nice to me. I usually don't activate my hamstrings a whole lot, so when I get to stretch them out, they're usually quite stiff. There are a few different variations for hamstring stretches. I just do one that's seated because that's easier for me. To save time, I do both at the same time. So pretty much you just sit like this if you can, and then the idea is to reach towards your toes while keeping your knees straight, or your legs straight, sorry. So feet together, trying to reach. I can't reach that far because I'm not that flexible, but you should feel the stretch right under here. Don't try to push it. Don't try to full on use a bunch of momentum to try to grab your feet or anything. It's not worth it. There's no ego in stretching. So that's the hamstring stretch. So the next stretch I usually do is a groin stretch, and that's because it's quite easy to do coming from the hamstring stretch. So when you're in the hamstring position, then all you really have to do is just lift your legs into this sort of diamondy shape, I guess. So I might turn this way for this. Both feet together like this. I usually just grab my feet, and then the idea is to lean forward so you feel it in your groin, which is just here. The next stretch I do probably has a name that I don't know. So if you know, please let me know. It stretches kind of your back. Well, that's where I feel it anyway. So you kind of sit up on your knees and then you're leaning forward and doing that sort of one. You know, I don't think you get the opportunity to stretch this muscle very often. So when you do, it feels pretty good. Just trying to reach out with your hands. Cool. All right, so that was the unnamed stretch. So now I'm going to get onto my back for, I believe this is called a figure 4 stretch. And pretty much what you do is you get onto your back like so. And then what you're doing is you're lifting one of your legs across onto your other, sort of just above your knee. So I think it's called a figure 4 because if you try to straighten out your leg, it sort of looks like a 4. That's a guess, but that makes sense. And once you're in that position, you want to grab under your leg, which is not bent like this, and you want to try to pull that gently towards you. And I feel this particular stretch in my butt cheek, or glute, sorry, glute. So you'll feel it on the opposite side that you're pulling. So if you're pulling your left leg, you'll feel the stretch on your right side and vice versa. If you do have anterior pelvic tilt, or in my case, something called lordosis, where your spine is curved, actually I can show you. So if I extend my legs, there's like a gap under my back. There's like a gap under here, so I can go like this. Shouldn't be like that. It should be straight. So the idea is to neutralize that curve. So one way you can do that is to just lift your legs like this. And then if you look now, there's not really a gap under my back anymore. Nice and straight. So that takes a bit of pressure off your low back, which leads me to the next stretch, which I don't know if it's really a stretch, but it's something that I do. So I can't lift my arms above my head like this if I was sitting down or standing, if I was upright. What this stretch is kind of a, I'm gonna butcher this term, but maybe a passive range of motion where I'm able to get that full range to pretty much 180 with my arm, just to stretch out my shoulder because yeah, I'm not able to do that ever when I'm up. So just taking gravity out of it, I can sort of let it flop down. If I try to keep my back flat on the mat, and all I'm really trying to do is lift my arms up, 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 and then down back to here, and trying to control the movement. So I'm not trying to just lift it up and then let gravity do the rest and just let my arms flop down. You're able to use a little bit of shoulder strength. Like I don't have a heap of shoulder muscle, but I can lift my shoulders past that sort of sticking point. And if you control it down, you're just getting that full range of motion in your shoulder. It's quite satisfying because you never get to do it. So I say 8 to 10 of those where I just go back and then up. And from here, we can do our next stretch, which is, again, I don't know the name of it, so I'm just gonna show you, but it's that classic one where you're lying on your back, you've got your legs extended out, arms extended out. Ideally, if there wasn't a bench here, I would extend this arm, but for the sake of showing you how to do it, that's what we're doing. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna cross your right leg over your left leg while moving your hips. So you're gonna move that leg over there. So you see that movement? So I started straight, and I'm pretty much just lifting that right leg over my left leg across. And that's gonna stretch your back. So that's sort of what my stretching routine looks like. It makes me feel good. I usually end up doing it after I go for a walk or just before bed, just so I'm loosened up. I definitely notice a difference in feeling less sore, which is always nice. And as I mentioned before, it's one of the things that you can do for muscular dystrophy is to stretch, and it'll reduce your chance of injury. If you have any recommendations for stretches, I'd love to hear them. I'm still learning all of this, so any guidance would be appreciated. I hope you got something out of it, and I'll see you next week. Bye.